Hello, students. Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Abhishek Tiwari here. Right now, students, I'm going to start a very fresh lesson of your literature, which is the chapter 5 of your snapshot, which is entitled Mother's Day. Okay, it is written by J.B. Priestley. So, students, today you are going to experience the summary of a very important lesson, which is Mother's Day, written by J.B. Priestley. So, Mother's Day actually is a play by J.B. Priestley. Okay, play, you know about, it's a drama or play. It is a satirical and humorous depiction of the status of women. Students, satirical, criticizing and humorous depiction or episode of the status of women, okay, in the society, in particular a housewife, as a housewife in a family. Okay, you everybody know this, what exactly the status of a woman in a family, particularly, okay, as a housewife. Moreover, a housewife dedicated dedicates all her time in the service of her family. Okay, however, a woman dedicates her entire time for the service of her family, but her family takes her service for granted. Okay, but her family, takes her service or understand her service as granted them. Okay, or that's just a paid service for which they are going to pay her. Okay, and never takes notice of her needs. They take the services of that lady, but they never think about to serve that lady who served 24 into 7. Okay, so the family never acknowledge her services or thank her for all that she does for them. In fact, you can also see and you have also faced that whether your mother or sister, they paid services to you, they pay services to you, they offer their services throughout the day to you, but they never ever get, okay, they never ever get any thanks or acknowledgement against their services by you and your family. Everyone neglects her, and this issue is prominent and relevant today. Okay, everyone, each and everyone, they talk about their needs and their services to that lady, but they never talk about her pain, her sufferings, her needs. Okay, who is actually serving you throughout the day. Okay, and therefore, this issue is really a very prominent and relevant today. Many houses out there sulk and suffer in silence. In many houses, household lady, she suffers and sulk all day long. Okay, in silence. She does not speak a single word, but she only faces the sufferings that is that is being gotten by her against the service she pay the family. Means she exceptionally pays her service, she exceptionally offers her service against this. She does not get even a single thank you. She has to suffer in silence. Also, the issue the play raises is genuine. The issues can't be set by mere changes of the personality of husbands. Okay, the issue this lesson is going to raise, it cannot be set by mere changes of personality of husbands. Okay, so this issue is such a depth issue which cannot be actually changed by the personalities of the husband, son and daughters. In order to give wives the praise they deserve, the family needs to give them the desired attention. Okay, so but what exactly they need is the desired attention that they should be given. Okay, so This chapter portrays the practical experience of a mother, okay, Mrs. Pearson. Her name is Mrs. Pearson. On a daily basis, her kids disrespect and disregard her, okay. In her own home, she was treated as a slave, as a gulam, okay. Thus, she felt a lot of ignorance and embarrassment every day. Okay, she felt a lot of ignorance and embarrassed every day, not only from her daughter Doris, her name was Doris, her son, okay, but by her son Cyril, but also from her husband George Pearson, who has completely turned a blind eye from his wife. Means they, all the three members of the family, whether Doris or Cyril or her husband George Pearson, they all are, they all seem, blind to behave, with her. Mrs. Pearson life turns when she meets Mrs. Fitzgerald. Okay, when she met Mrs. Fitzgerald, her life turned. Actually, Fitzgerald was a fortune teller. So she's a kind of Jyotsi and a magician. Okay, discussed her family members and their terrible behavior. She once, discussed the family members and their terrible behaviors. She tells Mrs. Fitzgerald everything about her family behavior. Okay. Moreover, Mrs. Fitzgerald recommends her to exchange personalities. As she was a magician, she suggested her to change the personality with each other. Means Mrs. Pearson turn into Mrs. Fitzgerald and Mrs. Fitzgerald turn into Mrs. Pearson. Means they both have to change their identities. ओके मीन्स यहाँ पे उन दोनों को अपनी पहचान चेंज करनी थी. मिसेस फिट्जराल्ड अपना रूप चेंज करके मिसेस पियर्सन बन जाती है, मिसेस पियर्सन अपना रूप चेंज करके मिसेस फिट्जराल्ड, so as to teach her family a good lesson, so that they would be able to teach a lesson to that family. At first Mrs. Pearson did not agree, but finally when Mrs. Fitzgerald encouraged her, she decided to switch their bodies to each other. After that, Mrs. Fitzgerald cast a spell and swaps her personality with Mrs. Pearson and vice versa. Okay, in a matter of second, their personality switch, and Mrs. Pearson, who was calm and composed, is now smoking and drinking, and Mrs. Fitzgerald is now sitting idle like Mrs. Pearson. Okay, the scene changes. Now Mrs. Pearson is in her home and Doris enters home. Okay, her daughter enters home. She hands her a dress and asks her to iron. Okay, or asks her to press, as she has to go on a date with her boyfriend Charlie Spence. Okay, she ordered her mother to press her cloth as she has to go on a date that evening, with her boyfriend Charlie Spence. Also, she even objects her mother smoking. She also objects her mother smoking, as she did not ever smoke. So she objected. And when she asked her, Mrs. Pearson replies very harshly and advised her to do her work herself. She advised, means apne kaam se matlab rakho. This kind of answer, was pretty different from Mrs. Pearson to, her daughter, Doris. Okay. Afterwards, Doris feels miserable and shamed and starts crying when her mother insult and rebuke her. Okay, as she did not get such a behavior from her mother, therefore she started weeping and feeling insulted. Okay, after this, her son Cyril enters and asks her mother hurriedly if his tea is ready. His son enters the house and inquired her mother whether the tea is ready or not. On which Mrs. Pearson refuses and advises him to prepare it himself. On this, Mrs. Pearson advises him and ordered that if you want, go and prepare your tea yourself. Okay, so these things actually happened with both the different type of experiences that both faced. Okay, then after both get surprised, astonished watching this kind of experience by her mother, his mother, as she was not like this earlier. So after that, at that point, Mr. Pearson enters the house and expresses his surprise on seeing her wife drinking and smoking. When Mr. Pearson entered and he found a very different, behavior by, his, you know, wife, as she was drinking and smoking, he was surprised. He objects. Mrs. Pearson makes him realize that if he can drink, then she can too. Okay, an answer was given, कि अगर आप ड्रिंक कर सकते हैं तो मैं भी कर सकती हूँ. ओके, फर्दर ही टेल्स हिम दैट इंस्टीड ऑफ स्पेंडिंग हिज टाइम विथ हर वाइफ ही इज स्पेंडिंग टाइम विथ पीपल हु आर मेकिंग फन ऑफ हिम बिहाइंड हिज बैक. Okay, again she rebuked her husband, okay, saying that you spend most of your time in the club and parties, to those peoples, with those peoples, those actually make fun of your behind your back. Okay, you do not spend your time with me, as I praise you all the time. Okay, so this way she charged over everyone, whether that was her daughter, son, or husband. Everyone faced a different experience. She taught them the lesson actually by doing several other activities in the family. So these all things are consequenced in each. Okay, so this is a very interesting chapter, I must say. And finally they all learned the lesson how to behave with the housewives. Finally Mrs. Pearson turned into Mrs. Fitzgerald once again. They switch their bodies, and then Mrs. Pearson find that the experience they faced, all the members faced, they turn into different personality, and began treating her. They began treating her mother and Mr. Pearson with his wife in a very different tone. So this is what the actually lesson Mother's Day. Okay, very interesting, very humorous, and very satirical chapter lesson, which actually I'm going to explain you from tomorrow. Okay, students, so stay with us. In the next lecture I'll start the explanation of this play. I'll introduce the characters and other things. Till then, you enjoy the summary. Next day we shall meet about it. Thank you. Have a good day.